Good morning. Good morning. Welcome everyone to WCS 2023. It is an absolute honor to speak with all of you today. My sincere thank you to the board of WCS for the invitation, not for me to speak, but for BASF to speak. It is a nice privilege for a supplier to have this opportunity and one that we take with the highest of honors. Thank you to the team that helped make sure I was prepared, and a special thank you to Eunice, who, for those of us who all know Eunice, man, doesn't she make you feel like the most important person in the room? Man, she really knows how to build someone up. So Eunice, thank you very much for your warm generosity and hospitality in bringing me here today. But on behalf of my colleagues at BASF, as mentioned, it is a privilege to be able to talk to you about how we leverage all that we've gained together as an industry moving forward into our future. As a brief agenda today, I'm going to do a quick look back. We're not going to spend a lot of time there because, gosh, we all lived it, we remember it, and we have our stories to tell. But I'd like to think about and have you remember those moments where partnership and trust has been created in our value chain. A look at where we are today and the uncertainty and the mixes of macroeconomic conditions that we're facing in this moment, but then looking forward with some optimism for our future of how we leverage the partnership and the trust that we have built. All right, so how did we get here? Do we feel that there's partnership and trust built within this industry? Do we feel that we're working together as an industry? A couple of years ago, I might have said, maybe. Maybe in some cases we had close connections, maybe in other cases it was more transactional. But the prior few years really forced us to work together in ways that we hadn't done before. So I'm sure everybody knows this term, right? The acronym VUCA was originally used by the US military to describe challenges of the post-Cold War era. But it's since been adopted by many fields: education, politics, business. In a VUCA world, change is constant and unpredictable, and there is a high degree of uncertainty for the future, kind of like how we're feeling maybe right now. Complex systems and interdependent relationships make it difficult to understand cause and effect, and ambiguity often surrounds important decisions. Living in a VUCA world can be challenging because it requires individuals and organizations to be flexible, adaptable, and resilient. It also requires the ability to think critically, make decisions quickly, and collaborate amongst others. Individuals and organizations, all of us, are ultimately defined by how we react to these kinds of times, how we react to adversity. Do we meet the challenge, or do we fold under the pressure? When we think about VUCA, the term is an understatement based on the environment in which we were thrust into in March of 2020. I know all of you have your stories about what that moment felt like for you, for your families, for your organizations. But what did it force us all as an industry to survive? As a survival mechanism, as described here, it forced us to dig into that resiliency, develop some new ways of thinking, and become more agile than we ever knew we needed to be in so many different ways. We, as a collective coatings industry, not only responded, but forged, in my opinion, a new level of partnership, of a get-her-done style attitude, and trust that has established a stronger industry for our future. The result of this? We built trust and stronger relationships that I firmly believe we need. So, how did we survive, and what did we learn along the way? I obviously don't need to remind any of you what happened. We lived it. We survived it. Some of us thrived through it. Maybe a few of us out there. Although it can feel like a really long time ago, in that strange kind of time warp of the last few years, I'm sure we are all remembering things that occurred and maybe are still dealing with in some kind of cases. Some of that volatility that we experience within our organization. Our team members looking at us as leaders for things we never had talked about in our workplace before. But what have we learned, and what, as an industry, can we leverage as we move forward to face the challenges and the opportunities facing our industry? The crisis required us as individuals, as suppliers, as customers, to be more open and transparent. We had more conversations around where products were going along critical value chains so we could make sure that we were properly prioritizing what was most critical to the environment, to humanity. We had to fully understand the needs and capabilities of one another and determine how we could make sure that we were working best together for our respective businesses. As demand continued to grow and we faced times of significant value chain shortages, we had to be clear about not only our expectations, but on the supply side, realistic potentials had to be openly communicated. I recognize that at this time, not everybody got what they wanted. That's very, very clear, and I'm very sensitive to that. However, while that is very regretful and what that could have been for some people's businesses, the experience did draw us closer by that transparency, by being open, by sharing those expectations, sharing those realities, and working together to be as creative as possible. So we saw all these challenges, but we also experienced in most of our industries an incredible surge of growth and demand for our products, all at the same time. So where are we today? Besides back here in Vegas at the Western Coding Show, where are we today, taking that from the past, looking forward? So, 2022 felt like the tale of two extremes, or the tale of two halves. At least it did at BASF. We started the year riding an incredible continued surge of demand for most of our chemistries. Consumers were buying what we had to offer, what we were selling to you, and things felt pretty good. We were fairly optimistic about the full year. And then second half, and especially Q4 came, and we saw a decline of demand from a delta from high to low that we had really never fully experienced. As said, it definitely felt like the tale of two different halves. We are always slow, we always have some seasonality. This was definitely more extreme than that. And while our industry experiences regular economic swings, this heightened demand fell through most of the pandemic and following the severe drop-off in extreme ways brought us to 2023 with very mixed areas of opportunities, mixed areas of optimism of where things were recovering and where things were going to take a little longer to come back. We've experienced this year some uncertainties continuing, that we've had not only different demand and needs within our industry or our chemistries, but often we've experienced some exceptional weather. I know you here on the West Coast, atmospheric rivers, a term I didn't know until 2023, put that in my new 2023 dictionary, atmospheric rivers and intense rain that had an impact, and in a pretty strong tropical storm and hurricane season on the East Coast. And some also of the, I don't know if it's ugly, but it's certainly hard to understand and fully explain the unique mix of macroeconomic indicators facing us here in the United States. So that's kind of how I feel right now. There's some good, there's some bad, there's some what is happening, really? So inflation last month, or in end of August, 3.7%, coming down from a high of almost 9, maybe slightly over 9, depending on which indice you follow. During that time, prices were in wild runaway mode, maybe running off the rails of this coaster. And even though it's come down significantly, 3.7% still considered not so healthy for our economy. The Fed's put it at about 2% is a good inflation rate that's ideal over the long term for our industry. And most recent jobs report released in September has 336,000 jobs were created in the US market in that month, more than double what was anticipated. And unemployment remains below 4%. Good signals if you're thinking about jobs and having the ability for people to work. However, it doesn't signal the best news for the US economy, because the central bank can continue to raise interest rate without any real fear of sending our country into a recession. Mortgage rates reached 7.5 or 7.49% to be precise the first week of October, up from 6.5% a year ago, and the highest level in more than 2 decades. So many of us as homeowners in this audience have never experienced numbers like this, or maybe we did very early in the days of buying homes, but we're sitting quite comfortably, if we have mortgages, in half of those kinds of rates. This is keeping the housing market, which I know we all watch incredibly closely, in basically neutral. If we think about some of our traditional markets, we look into the construction space. You know, unexpected headwinds are created by some of the different destocking initiatives. We're not seeing the builds. Lenders construction and property owners are concerned about building at these rates. Similar with the mortgage industry. People are not turning over in homes right now. They're sticking more comfortably in the rates that they have. And even though demand is building and continues to build in this country for more residential properties and people wanting to get into both rental and home ownership, people are making decisions to wait it out and to see what happens. So we have a lot of uncertainty that continues within our industry. So architectural demand, you have some numbers here. I think I might have yes, there we go. This is an overall U.S. total that you see there on the left-hand side, but broken down by DIY and pro in the market of architectural coatings, which I know many are players in that space. Obviously, this demand is closely tied to the housing industry for both new and existing, and home renovation and upkeep. The spike in demand that we all experienced in that 2020 when people stayed home and painted kind of everything. I've heard stories about people painting their closets. I see a couple ladies I know in the audience who did that over the pandemic. That is considered only now a blip in the industry, a one-time demand. And we're basically back in that same rate of purchases or of consumer demand for architectural paint in the same range as kind of in that pre-kind of COVID standpoint. There was expectation that we would see some build in Q3 of this year. Now maybe Q4, most likely not until sometime in 2024. However, there is some bright side in what we think about in the remodel market. Again, when people aren't turning over homes, they may look to continue to invest in the spaces that they have. So there may be some upside related to remodel, some modest growth, not what we saw throughout the pandemic, but in the next couple of years. Mainly, we believe in that professional space. In the last 4 years, the cost to build a home in the United States has risen at an unprecedented pace. From 2018 to 2022, bill of materials for an average single-family home increased by just under $40,000, or nearly 45%. In 4 years, compared to roughly a 47% increase in national home prices over that same time frame. Cost inflation reflects price hikes across a broad range of building product categories, but you see that how it's becoming more and more of a challenge for people to purchase homes at the current rate of increase that we've experienced over the last few years. And as mentioned, the inflation in the U.S. market leading to the Fed raising the interest rates up to that 7% has definitely had a significant impact on new housing sales and new housing starts that you can see on those two different axes. These lending rates, as well as the combination of increased home equity, many of us that have had homes through this time frame have seen our home values increase substantially. And then lack of supply are basically keeping homeowners in place. As mentioned, there may be a positive upside 2024, 2025 of remodel, of people recognizing they're going to stay longer in their space and they choose to make some decisions for upkeep that affects us beyond just paint, but also in other construction type of materials. But it will be modest at that point. Let's see what happens. I don't think anybody expected quite the demand we experienced in 2020. I think everybody I know personally already traveled to Europe in 2023 with big vacations, so maybe they'll choose to spend their money in 2024 back in their homes the way that we did in 2020. But let's see. But right now, mobility here in the housing market is key. And with that high interest rate, really decent home equity for many homeowners, and lack of supply means that we're not going to be seeing the kind of turn that we had experienced over the last few years. Moving beyond housing, and then I'll get to what do we do about all of this maybe not so great looking factors or indicators. But moving beyond housing, construction, and the architectural market, the industrial coatings area continues to see some growth. In 2022, there was about almost 19% growth in this space across a variety of different categories you see there. And 2023, while more modest, is still expecting about a 9% increase in value and about 2.5% increase in volume. A lot of different trends going on here, though, in our industrial areas for industrial coatings. There is some highlight or positive for US-based market or North America-based market, where reshoring and nearshoring certain products to reduce dependency on imported materials is helping grow some of the demand needed in this country. A lot of focus in the industrial space, though, is around creating operational efficiencies. How do we do more with what we already have? How do we have a higher productivity, reduce labor, decrease cycle times? These type of topics that lend itself maybe not to more gallons purchased, but to higher and more durable, more sustainable type products and longer term options. So, I know I've been talking about all of these factors that may have us leaving or questioning, so what do we do about it? What should we do about it? And for me, the big question becomes, how do we, the collective we, not as individual organizations or companies, but what do we as the collective coatings industry, how do we grow and advance our industry together? After being a bit distracted by product and raw material shortages that required a lot of qualification time over the past couple of years, there is a great opportunity for us along our value chain to re-engage on innovation partnership. As described in the previous slides, the market itself isn't recovering as swiftly as I'm sure any of us would like. However, there remains a great deal of potential to look for new ways of steering and growing our industry. From increasing trends, as mentioned, around labor savings and efficiencies in coatings applications, to a very challenging regulatory environment, and the challenge and responsibility to make better, safer, and more environmentally sustainable products, our industry is facing strong pressures and expectations. How do we leverage all that we've learned and practiced over the past 2 years to confront these challenges and move forward together? So let's start what's important to our consumers. Regardless of where we are on the value chain, we all have this in common. We are all consumers, and we all wish to sell our chemistries and our products to consumers. So what's important to them? And yes, I know and I recognize performance. Performance remains the top of the list. Certainly for many of BASF customers, you have told us this multiple times, but our consumers also want a strong performing product that they can depend on, that they can rely on, that they know and that they trust. But what else? While admittedly, our industry has not felt that same kind of consumer pressure or consumer pull of some other industries like skincare or things that you use in your household, products that you use around your families. Consumers are growing in their expectations that companies will do what's right, even if that isn't fully understood. They may not totally understand our industry, they may not totally understand our products, but they want to purchase from companies that they believe is doing what is right. And what is right? What does that look like? For me, this is not a question of are consumers willing to pay? And I feel that that question stops the conversations too quickly these days. But it's more of a conversation of, in the future, will these consumers even want to do business with you if you aren't making strides to have a more positive impact in our world? We don't know. We're taking it from our headspace, from our mindset as consumers. But the next generation of consumers that are entering the workplace, that are making purchasing decisions, may have a different point of view than many of us. Most companies that are represented here at this show have declared some really good big goals in this area. Many are built around reducing carbon footprint or carbon emission. At BASF, compared with our 2018 baseline, we strive to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from our production sites and our energy purchases by 25% by 2030. This means that we aim to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from 21.9 million metric tons to 16.4 million metric tons. There's still a ways to go, even at those numbers. And this is despite the growth plans and construction that we have from some new world-scale chemical facilities, most namely in Asia. This corresponds to a decrease of about 60% of our greenhouse gas emissions as compared to 1990. And our long-term goal is net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. We are intensely pursuing our climate protection targets with investments of up to €4 billion by 2030. So how are we striving to do this? And our different methods of having the impact that we're looking for. As mentioned, we are striving for net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And we're really looking at those Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, the things that we're doing, that we're contributing, that is our full 100% stop responsibility. We want to reduce, as mentioned, 25% by 2030 to meet our different climate protection targets. We've bundled those into a few different categories, and I'd like to quickly kind of walk through what those look like for you, or for us, excuse me. First, on the left-hand side, the green to gray, increasing our share of renewable energies in our global power supply. It takes a lot of energy to fund and to run world-class chemical facilities, and we have quite a few around the globe. One of our primary focuses is on electrification. We are actively taking large amounts of renewable energy to drive our chemical processes, replacing fossil-based power with green power, and renewable energy from sources like offshore wind will be a key contributor to that success. We also talk about power to steam. That's about capturing the potential of waste heat for steam production. In our world headquarters in Ludwigshafen, Germany, waste heat of up to 30 terawatt hours per year is released into the air or the Rhine River. An economically viable concept to gradually replace steam production at BASF cogen plants with heat pumps and steam compressors is currently being developed. And as a first step, we have partnered on a feasibility study that was completed at the end of last year. This planned and in action now large-scale heat pump will enable production of steam using electricity from renewable energy, tapping waste heat from cooling water sources at BASF as a source of thermal energy. The residual heat in the water will be processed using compression to produce steam that will be fed into our existing site steam network. By integrating the heat pump into the site's production infrastructure, up to 150 metric tons of steam can be produced per hour, equivalent to a thermal output of 120 megawatts. We also are actively looking at new technologies, including bio-based feedstocks, to further reduce greenhouse emissions. We're developing and implementing fundamental new low-emission production processes and have been piloting first technologies already between now and 2025, with plans to scale up between 2025 and 2030, with more new technologies being developed now to take us beyond 2030. In 2020, we developed a digital solution to make our product-specific greenhouse gas emissions more transparent, and have since determined the carbon footprints of around 45,000 of our commercial products. That means we can share within our industry with our customers the specific product carbon footprint for a product that is produced by BASF and sold within the industry. These product carbon footprints include all greenhouse gas emissions, from raw material extraction to the finished product leaving the factory location, so our cradle to gate, a total value of greenhouse gas. This is really important, I feel, that we are transparent about this so that when you and other customers are looking at the impact of your Scope 3 emissions of what you've purchased, you have clarity and trust in what it is that you're purchasing and the impact it has on your longer-term goals. In 2022, we have further expanded our portfolio of products beyond that original 45,000 with a certified reduced carbon footprint, including a few different areas of our business where we've been able to offer products that show that substantial reduction in product carbon footprint, mostly by the substitution of fossil raw materials. For instance, we use climate-neutral electricity from renewable sources instead of electricity from fossil fuels to produce low and zero product carbon footprint products. We've been working around this digital methodology for quite a bit of time, and it is aligned with ISO standards. We feel it's very important that as an industry, us in the chemical industry, but also as it relates to all of our customers across value chains, that what we're offering is based in science, is based in reality, and a decline or a reduction is a true one, rather than using methodologies that maybe aren't as aligned. It's been really important that we've been harmonizing this methodology across the industry and have been doing that together through a couple of different sources, one of them being the Together for Sustainability initiative that was created this as a universal guideline in September of 2022 across the chemical industry. The core elements of a circular economy include reusing resources, avoiding waste, and optimizing product features with respect to the entire product life cycle. Our circular economy program focuses on 3 action areas: increasing the use of recycled and renewable feedstocks, innovative material cycles, and new business models for the circular economy, including digital and service-based models. As part of our efforts to improve sustainability, we're continuously investigating whether fossil and petrochemical resources can be replaced with non-fossil or recycle-it-based alternatives. When making decisions, we take into account economic, environment, and social aspects, as well as other important criteria like supply security and process and product safety. We're not interested in substituting or solving one problem by creating another problem. So it is very important that this is looked at holistically. Recycling is playing an increasingly important role due to limited resources, different growing sustainability requirements in the markets, and regulatory developments. This is why we want to increase the use of our recycled material with our circular economy program. By 2025 onward, we aim to process around 250,000 metric tons of recycled and waste-based raw materials every year worldwide, truly replacing one-for-one recycled fossil raw materials. A focal point here is in the chemical recycling of plastic. This technology complements mechanical recycling and can help to reduce the amount of plastic waste that is disposed of in landfills and thermally recovered. Chemical recycling breaks down plastics into their building blocks or converts them into basic chemicals. And different methods are used to achieve this, and we're working on that right here as well in the United States. So I've just said a lot. What does this mean for our industry? What does this mean for the coatings industry? As I mentioned, differentiated performance is still number one. We know right now in our industry that sustainability alone is not what drives purchasing decisions, but sustainability is growing to be a strong second requirement. Our consumers want to reduce their impact on the planet, but they don't always understand what that means. And we, unfortunately, don't have yet, in many areas of our industry, really easily understandable claims that they can use and feel good about their decisions. Manufacturers are looking at ways to reduce their Scope 3 emissions and easy to understand, again, bio-based claims, looking for recognizable third-party certification, making sure it's not just a simple greenwashing or being told that you're doing something that's right, but that it's proven and rooted in science. And then various industry advocacy efforts. I know there's one underway with a vote in like 10 days that we're looking at related to architectural coatings and their impact related to LEED certification with that version 5. And that's all part of the Architectural Coatings Association. Looking to make sure that we have different tools within our disposal that consumers can better understand, that we can use to market products in ways that will help us differentiate when it comes to that taking something off the shelf or asking our customers and consumers to purchase. So, where does this leave us? We know that we continue to operate in a VUCA world. I don't think that's going to change. If you'd like to gamble on that, this is a good place to be. You can probably place a bet on that somewhere in this town. But we're going to continue to live in a world that's pretty uncertain, that's pretty volatile, that has some ambiguity in it, where we have to make decisions maybe without all of the facts, with increasing rates of change, increasing and uncertain demands. So, as I mentioned in the question that I asked earlier, how do we do that together? How do we work to navigate this environment as an industry? The macroeconomics that would drive demand aren't completely on our side, but what can we do? I firmly believe, BASF firmly believes, that we must move beyond the perceived roadblock of consumers' willingness to pay and determine how we can and how we want to, and I think that's important, how we want to influence our industry and the next generation of products. If we can build upon the increasing understanding and trust and openness that has been built over the past few years, truly out of necessity, we should be more open to discuss these challenges amongst ourselves, amongst our organizations within the value chain to move our industry forward. Beyond, though, the big challenges of only sustainability, we also must ask ourselves, do we have plans in place as an industry to react to the changing regulatory environment? Like sustainability, we all have the responsibility to make better, safer, more environmentally safe products. Today, European Union regulations and restrictions are far greater and are far exceeding those here in North America. And that's okay. I think that that's okay, but we can't put ourselves in too far of the back seat and not pay attention to what is happening. We're working within BASF to be as proactive in this space as absolutely possible, not only for customers and consumers who want to globalize recipes and standardize processes, but also recognizing that what is happening there will happen there. Again, it comes back to hedging that bet. It's more of a matter of when things will happen here, and we're already experiencing those changes. Some of them we're taking upon ourselves, some as an industry are happening to us. Do we have the capacity or the desire to address all of this, to address everything? What are things we can bear? What are things we want to change? And what are things we must address immediately to be responsible stewards of our environment and public health? How do we prioritize? And what do we deprioritize if faced with limited capacity to address all of the priorities? What different factors weigh in at the different levels of our supply chains? Are we having these conversations? When something happens to us, when a regulation changes, when expectations change, when consumer expectation changes, that will be too late. We need to be having these conversations and be more in the steering of these decisions and moving us together forward, basically marketing that to our industry rather than have governments or others dictate what we can and cannot do. Through the pandemic and the supply crisis, we were forced to work in ways we never imagined. I think many of you who have been on virtual calls with me have seen that I work in my home gym. Never expected any of the world to see any of that, and alas, here we are. I'm sure we've met each other's pets and kids, and everybody knows what day of the week the lawn care company comes because you have to shut the windows while you're working because it's just too loud, right? You all smile, but we're all in that together. But we also opened ourselves up a bit more, laying our proverbial cards on the table, or we are in Vegas. We've pushed our chips to the center. We had to do that when we were looking to solve problems and determine new and creative solutions to support our individual businesses, to support the employment of our people, and to support our industry. It certainly wasn't always perfect. As mentioned, I know not everybody got everything that they needed during that time. And I joke a lot with my team that some days very much felt like the whack-a-mole game. You all remember that carnival game where you take your mallet and you whack down one of the moles only to have another one pop up? That was what problem solving felt like, at least to us, for quite a while during these challenges. But we learned a lot together. We learned what was really important and what was just important. We found some better ways of working and communicating that have moved us forward, and we are forever changed by those experiences, not just as individuals, but within our industry as partners and along our value chain. And now is the time to continue building and leveraging those partnerships, the trust that was built to solve the challenge facing our industry and take a broader and bolder step forward to help create the path that we want to follow, leading our industry together forward. We have some great days ahead here in Las Vegas. It is a privilege always to be able to be together within an industry, and I encourage all of you to explore the many exciting presentations and topics that will be shared that shows the significant impact that coatings has on not only protecting and beautifying and enhancing a wide range of surfaces and substrates, but also has a significant impact on environment, both in terms of performance and sustainability. However, it's not just about the technology and the chemistry and the technical approach. It's also about the people that's behind it. It's about all of us. The coatings industry is driven by passionate and talented individuals who are committed to innovation, committed to quality, and committed to customer satisfaction. It's about these partnerships and collaboration that allow us to bring new ideas and solutions to our markets. With that, I'd like to just briefly take a second to thank a few key members of my team for their great support in this preparation for today's talk. So to Joy Bryant, Nick Foley, Kyle Flack, Laura Fisher, Louis Angeles, Zena McCarthy, and Brandy Coleman, thank you very, very much. Again, thank you to the WCS board for your invitation for BASF to speak, and thank you all for your kind attention. I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you.
BASF. We create chemistry.